Hi, this is Neha Anand. I'm an editor at the Fifth Estate. I have with me Rudra, who's contesting for the post of Institute Sports Secretary. We'll get started with your first question.
Sure.
Considering that we have two batches of freshers incoming in your tenure, you're faced with multitude of hurdles. Starting with the overcrowding at Vatsa, graduation of most of the contingent members, lack of availability of UG and PG seniors with inter-IIT experience, to train the juniors, and the necessity to build many teams from ground zero. How do you plan on tackling this major challenge to ensure IITM's reputed performance is sustained?
Yeah, so coming to the first part of the question, we have two batches of freshers coming in. Yeah, that's true. The 21 and 22 batches will be coming in. The first step in sports is the NSO selections. Right now, when the 20 batch came in, we had a very haphazard sort of selections. So the only way to sort of tackle this is to ensure students know what they're getting into before they get into it and have a proper schedule for that. So one of my initiatives does tackle this by ensuring there are 2 weeks in the beginning where there are beginner sessions and there are proper introductions with the contingent where they get to know about the sporting history and the opportunities that we do have for them. So they go into it with a prior knowledge of what is possible and what they can do. Talking about the contingent members leaving, yes, we will have a huge lack of experience and bonding there. The only way to sort of bridge this is to have them talk with the contingent and understand it's not something which is not reachable for them. It is easy. Everyone has started at some point. Everyone did start off as a fresher. Another initiative of mine does tackle that because it aims at just the contingent sitting down with the freshers, talking about their experiences and
We'll move on to your second question. Your proposal for the inclusion of postgraduate students into the sporting sphere is predominantly in two ways: the infrastructural revamp and the PG beginner session camp and league. While the former is likely to take some time in transpiring, what is your plan of action for the PG students who would love to play and can spare time only to play for leisure?
yeah, so right now for the PG students, the beginner sessions were being held, but they're sort of independent and individual and they're not really structured. It's not a program for anyone. And it leads up to the PG League, which is again for students who already know how to play, who want to play competitively, and who are already involved in sports. So like the infrastructure point is also aimed at providing them a space for recreation because it will be closer to the tower hostels, which is where they can easily access it. Right now, they have to travel all the way across to institute facilities, which is a time waste for them. And for the people again who play for leisure, the beginner program is introduced in a way that it is close together and it is followed immediately by a beginner tournament. So they're able to apply exactly what they've learned instantaneously. And again, the PG League, there will be some students who start out for leisure but they end up wanting to compete. So it is a culmination of these two things, the beginner camp and the beginner sessions, that leads up to the final PG League. So I think that answers the question.
We'll move on to your third question. Regarding your manifesto point, She for the Win, similar sessions have been conducted several times in the past, formally and informally. As you rightly pointed out in your feasibility report, despite the implementation of such programs, the turnout does seem to be rather low because it's centered more around bringing girls out of an inhibition. So how do you ensure that the sessions are conducive to this effect?
So as you mentioned, right now many of these sessions have been conducted informally as well, and the issue with that I feel is that when it is conducted informally, there is no backup, there is no structural, there is no support for this. So through this initiative, what I want is that there is a structured way in which the SOC as well as the women's reps and the women captains of the various teams, along with the women hostel secretaries, they come together and have this session and to break down how a person starts a sport. It is about the first inhibition like you mentioned, and the second thing is what they get out of it, what's the final reward. So for the beginner sessions, I have mentioned in my feasibility report that many of these sports will be happening within the girls hostels. So where the teams, the team captains, which the women's sports which are there, as well as the sports which are not there, will be working with instructors to bring them into the hostel space, which is the easiest place for them to start off any sport and start with the basics, and then they can come on out to the facilities and play with it. And the reward being, there is no way a student would want to get involved if there is no final reward. So right now I am trying to implement this in.
So we'll move on to your fourth question. All your manifesto plans are either contingent, PG, or freshie specific. What would you propose to an average GSP sporting enthusiast, not in either category, but eager to get back?
So right now, as you mentioned, contingent PG or freshie specific, and for an average GSP sporting enthusiast, there's not much in my manifesto. There are not many average GSP enthusiasts left. The current contingent has mostly graduated, and the main one of my main vision points is to rebuild the sphere from the beginning. So there is one point called the workout buddy system, which I feel will be very useful for this, where you actually pair up people who want to get into fitness, and through because fitness is the base for each sport. That is one of the main points for this. And rebuilding will involve a lot of focus on the new batches and the new freshies, and at the same time the underrepresented part in sports, which are the PGs. And the contingent also has to be rebuilt, and it will be the average GSB sporting enthusiast who will form the next contingent. So to focus on them and to sort of rebuild this together, the point might sound contingent specific, but it involves a lot of the GSB people in this as well.
So, your final question. Regarding girls' shorter, how will you ensure competitive fun actually takes place since Sharavati dominates all events due to sheer numbers, which actually takes away incentives of other girls' hostels to be through?
Yeah, regarding girls' Reuters, right now what you mentioned is correct. Sharaf does dominate in the girls' sporting scene. So for this, I can break down the main demographics that play in the girls' Reuters. That's either the Freshie Hostel Sariu or the PG Hostel Sabarmati and Tunga, and then the Sharavati Hostel. So for the Freshie Hostels, as I mentioned, bringing them into the sporting sphere is going to be a huge focus in this next tenure. And so the beginner sessions also, which happen, a lot of freshies will be involved in that. So we'll be bringing them into the sporting sphere in general, and because of that, I feel Sariu's participation and involvement will increase. At the same time, I'm bringing facilities into the Sabarmati hostel, which will push more and more PG students to also play. At the same time, there is something known as the Freshie Idol, which will also be continued to help the first two batches that come in to also get involved in the competitive scene, so that they can also go ahead and compete with each other in the final struggle.
Thank you, Rudra. Good luck.